What if I told you the light bulb, something that is lighting up all our houses every day, is one of the biggest tyrants that history has ever produced? You're probably going to wonder what I'm on about. And to back up my statement, I'm going to take a slight detour. When all of us interact with tech, whether it's at work or in our day-to-day lives, we tend to think of tech as something that's very neutral. We tend to look at it in a bubble, isolated from the politics, the society, and the cultural aspects of our lives. We look at it as something that stays in isolation. Unfortunately, tech is anything but. Let's look at some examples. So, a few years ago, an AI model was given a task of upscaling an image of President Barack Obama. It did the job quite well, but with one slight catch. At the end, Barack Obama was a white man instead of his original ethnicity. And this is not it. There have been millions of incidents like this. One of the largest tech companies out there launched a chatbot way before the eras of LLMs and GPTs. This chatbot learned from every user interaction that it had. By the end of one day, it was massively racist, xenophobic, bigoted, and had to be taken down without any delay. Because of incidents like these, the industry hasn't earned trust at all. As consumers interact with innovations that keep coming out and with new launches that big companies keep putting out, there is an inherent distrust in all these interactions. We go in skeptical, we go in hesitant. Because while these innovations are coming out and progress is picking up at a rapid speed, and that curve of how much ideas and how much innovation is becoming actual usable products just keeps sharpening. All the decisions that go into those products and those ideas are purely driven by profitability, scalability, and how much people can benefit from those ideas. But where is the morality? Where is the ethics of all those decisions that drive business? It's important that as we progress deserves ethics as company. Now, we have established that computers aren't isolated, tech isn't isolated. Because of that, when we work, when we build software, when we build tools, every bit of information that we hold in ourselves, whether it's again cultural, social, even economic, trickles down into the stuff that we build. Our work, as much as we try to isolate it, starts to inherit the biases that we have. And in an era of machine learning and AI, where every bit of information that's put into a computer multiplies tenfold and hundredfold, this is multiplication for those biases that we put in. One slightly biased piece of information put into a system reflects hundredfold on more and more things that are built, and that one bit of, say, racism enters into a system, the impact that it has is immeasurable. How do you solve this? Ethics isn't something that we can just start to think of and say that I'm going to be more ethical. It's a practice. It's a journey of seeing things that were once black and white, but the more you dive into them, they become shades of grey. Most of us, myself included, we start by learning ethics from your mom or from your parents, and most of it comes from there. As you go along in life, you pick up a little bit from the people around you, the environments that you're a part of, but you keep working on it. You're always learning, your outlook is always evolving, your ideas are always changing. So we become more moral in life and in our work by actively working on our outlook towards every decision that we make. Now, I talked about what seemingly was black and white becoming shades of grey. And it's not just one shade of grey, it's not black and white becoming grey. It is very nuanced across this massive spectrum of multiple shades of grey. And the classic trolley problem is a philosophical thought experiment that illustrates how something very obvious, the moment you add an environment or the moment you add variables to that equation, can become something that is very difficult to choose. Let's take a hypothetical situation. If you're in a train that's heading down tracks, and as it stands, the train is going to kill 4 people because it's moving at high speed and cannot be stopped. You have an option as the driver of the train to take a slight detour, to take a left turn, and only kill 1 person instead. Now, if you are put into that situation, what would you do? The default thought process for most of us is going to be, I'm going to take that left turn, because killing 1 person is much less harm than killing 4 people. How does that change if you're not in the train? You're not the one who's directly doing the harm, but you're just outside. You have a lever to pull, and pulling that lever changes the track of the train. How does this change your decision? For most of us, again, it's more or less going to be the same, because the end harm is what matters. Whether you're pulling the lever or you're in the train itself, you want to save lives. What if you have the choice of pushing someone onto the tracks, and by doing so you stop the train? None of the other lives that are tied to the track, none of them are lost. Here is where it starts to get murky, because now you have an option to sacrifice 1 life, save multiple lives, but in that process you are first-hand becoming a murderer. You are directly involved in taking an action that causes harm. It's still, while it gets murky for most people, some of us might have clarity that I would still end 1 life but save 5 of them. What if the situation changes slightly, where if you take that left turn, the 1 person has a fatal injury and dies immediately, but the 4 people only get an injury and don't die? Again, this one's seemingly very easy, because if you don't take the turn and 4 people are injured, nobody dies. There's only harm done, but there's no death involved. But add nuance there. That 1 person had a painless death. Suffering was momentary, death came, and that was it. But the other 4, if they had injuries, they had to face a lifetime of waking up with pain every day. 40, 50, 60 years, however long they lived, every morning they had a flashback to that day on the tracks. Which is better? Again, no right answer in any of these problems. They only serve to highlight how adding variables removes the black and white concept and makes it grey. What if you're on the tracks and you have a remote that can move the train to the other tracks where you're not on it? Again, seemingly very simple, because survival instinct kicks in. You're going to preserve your life over anyone else's life, because that's basic human tendency. How does that change if the other track has your child on it? Most parental figures are going to be completely open to sacrificing their own life to save the child's life instead. This also highlights how seemingly very obvious decision, the moment you add nuance, gets massively complicated. What about hope? By default, that 1 person is on the track which is not supposed to be in use. He has hope, he or she has hope, and hope drives people, drives our entire civilization more than anything. We wake up every day because of hope that today will be better. So by taking that decision, you are saving more lives than that 1 life, but you are in the process also crushing hope. What if there's only 1 person on each track, but one of them is going to pay you? Does this change anything? Probably, because if 1 life is going to be lost either way, you might as well exit with a profit. What if one of them is a good citizen, one of them is a bad citizen? Now, this one is probably the hardest of them all, because objectively they're both 1 life, they're both overall good individuals, but towards society maybe one of them litters, maybe one of them doesn't clean up after himself. Because of incidents like this, the choice is going to be easier to make. But the differentiation is so small that even if it's easier to make, you're probably not comfortable making it. Now, all of these broadly fall into 2 schools of thought. Of course, there are many more, but overarchingly, utilitarian and deontological frameworks take center stage. Utilitarian models talk about how it doesn't matter what decisions you take, it's the end outcome that matters most. Whereas deontological schools of thought talk about how the outcome may or may not change, it's your immediate decisions in the moment that matter. Now, I highlighted how situations can get complex. Right? I highlighted how it's important for us to think about ethics. How do you then actually make these decisions? And there's no right or wrong answer here, but there are 4 questions you can ask yourself to quickly give you a gut feeling and get a sense of what you should be doing. First, ask yourself, am I treating people as ends or means? Am I actually solving for human betterment, or am I just using human betterment as a way to get profit, scalability, or any of your intrinsic motivators? Second, ask yourself, would I be okay if someone did this to me? This one is a strong question to ask because this one starts giving you a gut feeling. The moment you put yourself in the receiver's shoes, you start to wonder, is your decision correct or not? Third, would you be okay if this was published in tomorrow's papers? Very often, exposing a decision to the world at large starts to make you hesitate because maybe you don't want to be seen in a negative light. The moment that hesitation comes in, you know you're leaning one way or the other, even if you don't necessarily admit it to yourself. And lastly, happiness is subjective. Don't try to make everyone happy because people's measurement of what makes them happy is very different. Instead, ask yourself, can I minimize suffering for as many people as possible in whatever form or shape? Right? Maybe you're reducing harm, you're reducing inconvenience, but can you minimize suffering as much as possible? It's important to think through all of these and ask yourself these questions because, like we saw earlier, the train is heading down the track either way. Disregarding it, looking the other way, itself is a political act because it is going to harm people, it is going to have a negative outcome. As technology is gathering critical mass right now, and we're on the verge of a massive revolution fueled by AI and computers, now is the time where we need to start considering how can we make our output, our work more ethical. Don't look the other way because that itself is taking a stance. And that's where I come back to my original story, right? The Lightbulb is one of the biggest tyrants that history did put out. When it was announced, when Thomas Edison started mass marketing and spreading the light bulb, most people looked at it as a symbol of hope. Their first notion was that the light bulb will reduce darkness, it will reduce crime, it will drive away pests, and the world will be more brighter as a whole. You know what happened in reality? Industrialists and factory workers used the light bulb to keep factories open for longer. They made people work longer shifts. The day didn't end at sunset anymore. They introduced the concept of a night shift, all driven by the same innovation that was supposed to make the world a brighter place. For us, where we stand now, tech is that light bulb. It's gathering critical mass. It's going to change the landscape of humanity for the next few centuries. It's up to us to think, how can we make sure the decisions that we take today have positive impact for centuries to come. Thank you so much, but don't stop here. This was about evoking these thoughts in your mind. When you work on things, when you're building, think about the decisions that you make. Think about how you can be fairer and how your work can benefit more people. Thank you so much.